name is Billy Dees. Welcome to, I guess I'll say the podcast here. That's what I normally say. Welcome to the program. And I am new to Fireside. And Fireside is new to me. So I'm kind of doing a little venture here and, just getting an idea of how this all works. And to give myself some content on Fireside so that people can learn a little bit about me and know a little bit about what to expect on future shows that are more planned and more formal. So with that being said, I've been doing podcasting for a very long time, probably before it was called podcasting. There were a number of things that I've been involved with over the past 30 years. And yeah, 30 years, I'm giving away some of my age there. I can remember doing voiceovers. I can remember, actually driving tapes. You remember those ribbons that had music on them and sound on them to various radio stations for them to play the ads. I had a very small, I worked out of the attic of the home that I was living in. I had a small studio up there. Did a lot of voiceovers for local radio stations and other things. I also did sound for bands. So I was always moving around, and creating audio content has been something that I'm very passionate about. I do believe that the spoken word is an art form. And not every podcast, not everything that you are going to do is, going to unlock secrets of the universe. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is I'm not one of these podcasters who are constantly repurposing stuff. They do a video and they strip the audio off of it, throw it into a podcast. And quite frankly, a lot of the established media personalities do the same thing. They have a cable show, some sort of a talk show on a regular broadcast TV or cable. They strip the audio off of it, maybe tailor it a little bit and repurpose it into a podcast. And I understand it has a number of values. It has a value in terms of a lot of people who can't watch the show can at least listen to it while they're commuting and other things. And that's one of the values that podcasting has. And there's nothing wrong with that in the big picture. And it also, if a famous celebrity who has a talk show, some of the silly shows that, some of the talk shows and some of these other things that are going on, when they come on to a podcasting platform, they bring people with them that may not normally be interested in podcasting. But these big names do have a value in terms of the audience that they bring in. They acclimate a lot of people to various types of media that may or may not have been interested in ever listening to a podcast before. So that's all good. The downside to that is that mediums such as podcasting are always built by small independent creators. And what happens is once their creation, starts to get really big and it starts to get up off the table, all of a sudden now, the people who podcasting was too small for me to deal with. That isn't a real medium. I do radio, I do TV. Now, all of a sudden, 5 or 10 years later, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, but in a relatively short period of time, podcasting is this beast, and everybody wants to get their collar on it and claim it as theirs. And that's when the small guys who created the medium can get squeezed out. So all of a sudden they're competing with people who have multi-billion dollar broadcast entities behind them. And the idea that a small creator sitting in a studio who is telling some kind of a story, he's interviewing somebody, and when I say there's a certain magic to audio, it's an art form. When you are telling some heartfelt story, when you are articulating that, your voice travels out of your mouth, goes several inches into a professional microphone and right into someone's ear. There's a certain intimacy with that video doesn't have. Now, video has its applications. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but there is a certain type. We are vocal creatures. And when you can express yourself, when you can express your emotion, when you can express your passion for something, and it comes out in your voice, that is so recognizable. You're not relying on hand gestures. You're not relying on pie charts. You're not relying on all those cutesy little photographs that those YouTubers use, which absolutely drive me crazy. And they all use them. I just absolutely refuse to do that. Even your looks, for better or for worse, there's certain that, if you are exceptionally attractive, or if you're trying to be funny and you have the looks of Don Knotts or, any of those people, comedians often aren't necessarily the best looking people in the world. There's not too many Brad Pitt stand-up comedians. I'm sure they exist. But most of them have either average or something about their facial mannerisms and all that. Jim Carrey, for example, all those people, they rely on so much more. But when you are talking, and you've got to, you can't rely on your looks. You can't rely on facial expressions. You can't rely on hand gestures. You have to be able to put your message into words. Okay. And that is something that I feel is an art form. And that's the mindset that I feel most podcasters and most serious voiceover people, that's the mindset that they use. Okay, when they are creating. Now, here again, not every episode is going to lock secrets of the universe. But in terms of their methodology, they're not just taking something, stripping it off a video, stripping something that they did earlier on Spaces or earlier on LinkedIn audio, and just throwing it somewhere. And, well, okay, there's my podcast. I got another another type of content there, and maybe I can throw this other thing there, and I'll throw this there. That's not, to me, what creation as a creator that you should be doing. So, but that's my opinion, though. Here again, everybody has their strategy. So if you become a listener of mine, and here again, for some of you that may have just come in, I am new to Fireside. There's a lot happening in the world of audio right now. I have been fairly successful on Twitter Spaces. I have not used Twitter Spaces as a production tool. Okay. I have, but I don't feature that. That's not here again. I'm very much a person who believes in studio productions. Here again, being really careful about crafting my message and how the podcast sounds. Once in a while, I will do an open discussion, and Twitter Spaces is great for that. It's here again. A lot of podcasters, they rely on all their social audio to carry their podcast. That's not something I do. But I have been fairly successful on Twitter Spaces, and I always have a lot of people come into those spaces. Needless to say, there's some changes going on over at Twitter. I believe in the long run, Twitter will survive, and I don't know how Twitter Spaces is going to be considered in the future. It seems like the current management over there, I'll put it that way, is using Twitter Spaces quite often. So I'm inclined to believe that it's going to stay there, and I hope it does. The one thing nice about Twitter is that it is probably the most trending type of social audio there is. When something is breaking, it's on Twitter. It can take a while to show up on Facebook, and it can take days to show up on LinkedIn, but it's in real time on Twitter. If you Sunday afternoon, you can try that out. If you're a football fan, just tell you hashtag the team that you're watching, and you'll find tweets. People are watching that game and they're tweeting stuff. It's happening in real time. And there's so many people on there. We're talking hundreds of millions with all kinds of different interests. And as a creator, I'm strong in the writing community. I'm strong in the music community. I'm very strong in the community for people who are advocates for different things, different types of afflictions, different types of diseases, social causes, and all these other things. So that community is already there. So it makes sense to want to do Twitter Spaces in a place where all those people already are. With that being said, Twitter Spaces is glitchy right now, and there's some other things that can happen with it. I have popped over to Clubhouse. That one doesn't particularly intrigue me. And Discord right now is all the rage. And I'm experimenting with that as well. But getting back to Fireside, I'm very excited about Fireside for a number of different reasons. It obviously is an audio platform. It has the mixture of social audio, and it also has a mixture of a production tool, which Twitter Spaces is not. You can make it a production tool, but it's really designed for end users to create a community and talk to one another and so forth. It's really not designed to be a production tool like StreamYard is. Okay. Fireside has elements of both. It has a social audio aspect. And because of the fact you can do so much with it, whether it be streaming to YouTube, downloading your files, and all of these other things, hey, you know what? It's kind of got, the best of both worlds. I'm not using video right now, but I like the fact that you can incorporate video into this. Video for me is, I got mixed emotions about it because here again, I'm very much focused on audio, but video has applications depending on what your content is. Interviewing a lot of authors like I do, a lot of the publishers want the videos to be available at least for the author's website. So we'll do something on YouTube or something like that. And of course, they use the link, and that way their authors can be seen. So with that being said, I kind of feel that, this is the best of both worlds in that you can make somewhat of a quality recording, and I'm going to find that out more tonight. And after today, of course. And you also have the ability to be social and create groups and all of these other things. I do believe that with podcasting, you have to have realistic expectations. I get approached by a lot of people who want to be a guest on the podcast, and they're equating that with advertising. They're equating that with being on a huge radio show or something like that, and they're going to get all kind of calls about their book. Podcasting at its best is a type of content that you should be creating if you're going on the guest circuit, you should be giving value to that audience, talking not in the form of an infomercial, but in the form of somebody who's going to talk very sincerely about how they wrote their book, their writing techniques. If you had some kind of an experience that led you to write that book, that's the type of thing that any audience will enjoy hearing. And if people find you intriguing, they'll make their way over to the book, and you have to put your time in. And this includes on your blogs. This includes all the things that you're doing on social media. You have to put some effort into it, and podcasting is a component of that. But doing a podcast and expecting an explosion of attention is probably not going to happen. I do have a person in the room, and the screen name appears to be Mistress, and I'd be very interested in what you have to say.
Hello, Billy Dees. I actually came in to do a show myself, and it's so rare to see a live show that I think I might be interested in.
Okay.
And your approach to this topic I thought was interesting, so I decided to postpone my own show and just sit in here and hang out with you for a bit.
Oh, wow.
I like what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense in terms of the approach and one's intentions, and also just having realistic expectations about what's happening.
Yeah.
I do think that too many times people want to just, hit it big really quickly, but we don't want to put the work in.
Correct.
We don't want to do the work and take our time and network and make sure that we have good quality content. So I think what you're saying is right. It's right on time with what we need to be hearing. Good stuff.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Tell me a little bit about your show, because I hear this is the social audio aspect of it. Tell me a little bit about your content, because here again, I'm new to Fireside, and I'm very interested in checking out some shows and getting a good feel for what people are doing on here.
Well, I will tell you that people don't come into my live shows because I think I'm a bit scandalous. I think I'm like the black sheep or the stepchild on this platform.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a dominatrix. And what I've decided to do is take my experiences in working with the underground BDSM world and help people to understand what's really going on with men and sex. So people become very intimidated by the topic.
Yeah.
They become very intimidated by the fact that I say what I mean and I mean what I say, not just for men, but also for women.
Sure.
So I'm trying to clean up my language for you.
Okay.
But I say what I mean. For men and women, both sexes need to do some work if we are going to change this environment that we are in, where men and women are using one another for different reasons.
Yeah.
Sex is a beautiful and natural part of life.
Sure.
But let's put it in context. Let's understand it better. And let's, as women, understand what's driving men, and men take accountability for who you are and where you are, and stop bullshitting. Mm-hmm. And that's my show.
That's very interesting. If you can stay on for just a few minutes, can I just ask you a couple questions? I've been actually pursuing this topic. I haven't done a whole lot with eroticism and things like that per se. That's probably not my niche, but I have written a few articles for some erotica sites and some other things, and talking about how sexuality legitimately is talked about and used for entertainment. And then when does it become something ugly? And that can sometimes be a tough area to navigate. One of the things in the going through some of this research, interestingly, to me, this is very interesting. As much as we talk about sex as a society, we enjoy sex. We enjoy the sexy girls dancing around in the videos, and we enjoy the guys with all the abs and all these other things. I'm going to say almost every particular research study has been done is showing that people are having, as a whole, sex much less often than they ever have before. And this includes married people, single people, what have you. It seems like for all the talk and preoccupation that we have with sexuality, that it seems like actually doing it is something that we are doing less and less. Why do you think that is?
First of all, those types of studies, I would say, are being done by probably mental health professionals, right? Who have some sort of backing and support, some sort of funding. Listen, men do not tell the truth to mental health professionals when it comes to, their sex drives.
Yeah.
I have clients who are, working through addictions, and they will tell me how much porn they watch, but they won't tell their sponsor.
Yeah.
Men lie when it comes to sex. So those studies, I wouldn't believe them. Now, to put it in a clearer context, it probably is true that couples, like, male-female couples who are in committed relationships are having less sex. The reason for that is because so many more men are growing sex addictions. So when they want to engage with their female partners, something feels off to her. She can tell that she's being used. She can tell that there's this kind of deviance that's in him, that, he's unsatisfied.
Yeah.
She can tell that something is wrong. And so what I'm finding is that women are shutting down, and they're like, no, I'm not doing this. The other thing that's happening is men are kind of breaking the spirit of women because they are becoming so enthralled with what they're seeing with sex, with porn, sex and porn, that they are trying to get their wives and girlfriends to do things that they've seen in these porn flicks.
Yeah.
Now, the way that they do it is they ease her in. They'll say, well, just do this for me. And then she does it. And then they go, oh, well, now they just add this on. And so what they do is they sort of drag her into their sexually deviant space until she feels disgusted with herself. She feels, upset with him because she can never go back. She can never undo those things.
Yes.
And so what I'm finding is that there are a lot of women who are hurt and broken, damaged, remorseful, and resentful, and they just don't want their guy to touch them because there's something wrong. And she just doesn't want that in her body. So women are shutting down. But are men having less sex? Absolutely not. They are going out there, and then they're calling people like me to try to get themselves under control.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't believe those reports. Absolutely not.
Fair enough. Sometimes, keep me in mind. I'm not afraid of this topic, and from a very serious standpoint, not to do a salacious show and ask you a bunch of crazy stuff. That's not me. But I think this is a topic worth discussing. So sometime in the future, kind of keep me in mind. I'd like to come back to you. I know you have your own show to do. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, but thank you very much for coming on.
I'm staying. I don't have a schedule. I'm staying. I'd love to support you. And thank you very much.
Oh, sure. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. If it's Stefan, hello, welcome to the show. And am I saying your name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming in. I'm glad to hear from you. What would you like to point out?
First, I like your show already. It's unique. There's not a lot of shows here on Fireside like this one. There's another one, but it's always, I don't know, like some people just don't do it because it's opinionated, but I like it. I love it. I'm like, yes, I saw your show and I was like, finally, someone's talking about podcasting.
Great. Are you a podcaster? I see you have a little in your picture there. Looks like there's a microphone. I don't have my glasses on. I'm looking at a small screen, but it looks like you're sitting in front of a microphone. So I presume you're either a musician or a podcaster or something?
Yeah, so I'm a podcaster. I have a show here on Fireside called The Conversation, where I talk about a lot of society issues like racism, sexism, and topics like that. Because for some reason, the podcasting world, it doesn't really do very well. But here on Fireside, it does amazing. So really,
you mean those subjects don't do well on podcasts, or is that what you're saying there? Those subjects don't.
Yeah, I feel like the society group in podcasting doesn't do very well out there because people are looking for other things.
Yeah. Well, that is true. Podcasts are something that people search for by topic. So unless they're particularly going for that topic, they may not find it. And that's one of the things that's kind of nice about social audio in general is you can stumble across something and, find something to listen to that you may have searched out. And I kind of equate that to the early days of music. There was a time when I was a young man, if you wanted to hear your favorite song, you had to listen to a bunch of other songs that you may not have listened to. And that might have got you on to a new artist or something like that. Whereas now people go directly to their phone and they call up the song that they want to hear. So therefore, they're not exposed to things that they may not listen to on their own. Mm-hmm. And that kind of happens with podcasts as well. People have a tendency to stay within a certain genre. And one of the things I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question about this, since you talk a lot about a lot of societal issues. No matter what part of the spectrum that you are from, I have noticed a lot of people who talk about the issues that you talk about are either from one perspective or another. And I feel a lot of the reason for this is because we follow people who we like. We follow people that we agree with. And all that really does is reinforce what we already believe. It's very hard to get somebody to listen to somebody that they don't agree with, or follow somebody that they don't agree with, or what have you. You're always going to get the people that are already in your camp. And this is one of the things when you're talking about complex issues, that's a real problem, because these things have more than one side. It's not just right or left. I always say, I'm not an ideologue. I don't approach something from the right or the left, but I go around at 360 degrees. And most people don't have the patience for that. They want to hear something that hits that little button and says, I like this guy. This guy makes sense. I agree with him. And if they don't hear that quick, they'll dump your show. And I know that from experience because I've been doing this a long time. And if people don't hear something that they agree with relatively soon, they will dump you. How do you try to crack that? That's got to be very difficult.
That's one, you're right. Most of the people, I try and gear my show toward getting someone from the opposite side to come into the show and to have that opposite opinion. Because like you said, otherwise I'm just talking to a bunch of people who already agree with me, right?
Yeah.
And so I try and challenge those on the opposite view to come to the show. So I'm like, if you have a different opinion, this is your time in a safe place to talk, right? So you're not going to be attacked. You're not going to be degraded. Like, this is your time to share your point of view. And then that way, more people can understand the differences, and then that way they get both sides. So it's not just one side, it's both sides. But it's always going to be a challenge. So I just try and always, before the end of my show, I send that challenge out so someone can be like, you know what? I think I will go to his show next week and, tell my part.
Yeah.
Tell my opinion of it.
Well, you sound like you have a great approach, and here again, this is something I'd like to, check out your show. Here again, I'm new to Fireside, so just about everybody that I'm meeting, except for the people that have carried over with me from Twitter, anybody else that I meet, it's a new experience. So this is another show that I'm going to have to, put on my list. Let me jump back. You can stay right with us there, Stefan. Let me jump back to Mistress on this. As far as you are concerned, you also have a topic that people are either very intrigued with. Okay, this is dominatrix. So this is something I really, wow, this is cool. And then you're going to have the people, oh, hell, that's not for me. That's immoral. How do you get the people that are in between? Is there a way that you can convince them that eroticism in its purest form is a type of art? It dates back to the cavemen drawings on the wall. It's been with us a long time. It's something that is supposed to accent human sexuality and make it fun. How do you approach that, Mistress?
First, thank you for your question. But first, I would like to take a moment and say to Stefan, I appreciate everything that you said. I think that we need to have, I love what you said about safe spaces, because it's not about agreeing with everyone, but it is about being able to communicate openly and honestly, so that we can figure out how to come together. It's not about agreeing with one another. It's about being able to acknowledge and appreciate who people are. So thank you for what you said, and I'm following you as well. I just wanted to, before I moved on, I just wanted to acknowledge Stefan. So thank you for that. Billy, to answer your question, listen, I've been underground for 15 years. So when I come out and I do a show, people are so funny because they think, oh, this is so cute. She's so sweet. They don't know that I am hardened and tough as nails and don't mess with me. They think that this sweet little voice is just going. So I get all sorts. But usually what happens is people who listen to at least a couple of the shows will understand that my heart is in the right place. And I'm here to help people. And if you play games and you try to make a mess, you try to create drama, all I do is block you and move on. Mm-hmm. I am not the Howard Stern of podcasting. I'm open and honest, and I do deal with heavy topics. Yeah. But ignorance, I do not tolerate. I don't deal with foolish people. I get mostly men who are desperate to change. And it's heartbreaking to see a man who's in his 50s, 60s, 70s saying, Mistress, I don't know why I'm like this. Can you help me? Yeah. Now, that was the way things were 15 years ago. But Billy, the way things are now is that I'm getting calls from men who are in their early 20s saying, I'm addicted. And I spend all my money on this. And I've had to drop out of college. And I'm not going to become a doctor because all my money and time and attention go to my sex addiction. This is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So when people come in to play games, I put them in their places really quickly and I get on about my work because I'm here to help people, improve their lives.
Yeah. How do you reach those people? That's because of the fact, like when I was approached, an author you may or may not know, she's actually from the UK. Her name is Billy Rosie. And she commissioned me to write a piece about if you write erotica and you have, erotic books. Her point was, if you want to legitimately sell eroticism, you get the people who are searching for porn, and then you get the other people who may not even understand that these stories are very complex. They're very sincere. They're very human, but they have a sexual element. And in your case, I believe, you're doing something that is very interesting. There is an addiction to porn. And I kind of believe if there's any truth at all of those studies that people are having like less sex now, I really believe it's because of the addiction to porn. Porn used to be plan B. That was when you couldn't get laid. And now porn has become plan A, So how do you find those people? And this kind of, I touched on this with Stefan. For people who really want to examine this subject seriously, how do you get that message that this is the place to be? It seems to me like that with your type of content, that person is hard to reach.
No way. I position myself right there in those little hubs where they are selling sex.
Okay.
I put myself right there and I go, listen, basically, if you're tired of, orgasming and feeling empty and judging yourself, then this is the place for you to be. So I put myself in those places where they are growing sex addicts. And I just put my little sign up and I go, I can help you to get better. Now, the interesting thing here is that I'm confident in what I do because I used to be a jerk off girl, right? I was that person that he would call because he was addicted.
Right.
But my heart started breaking for my clients when I saw that you're addicted to me, so you're neglecting your wife, and now you want to leave your family to be with this woman that you've never met. Like it was crazy to me.
Yeah, sure.
You need to tell me that you haven't paid your son's college tuition because you're feeding your addiction to me. I started waking up and realizing this is not a joke. So I was that person who was hurting men and taking advantage of them. And I take that same knowledge that I have about making them addicted, and I use it to help empower them to get better. And it works.
That's fantastic. And I got to tell you that is, if I would have felt, who am I going to meet on today's show? Somebody that has that angle. I got to say, that's one of the great things about social audio. I don't know that I would have run across you otherwise. And I'm so glad that you came on because that's such an interesting perspective. I'm going to make a few comments here, and then you both can chime in on this. One of the little quips that I have in the background for the podcast is the best equipment in the world will not overcome bad content. As somebody who has been in the professional audio field for a long time, I pride myself on knowing a lot about audio and microphones and all these other things. But quite frankly, those things will not make or break your show. The things that are going to make or break your show have to do with connecting to the audience. And there's a lot involved in that. One of the things that I always feel is very important is to have objective information. It is one thing to give your opinion, but I always try to preface it with the facts as I know them. And in the same way when I'm dealing with authors or musicians, things like that, the best thing to do is tell your story. That will, if your sincere story, if your truth connects with the audience, they will go across the bridge themselves and buy your book or buy your music or continue to listen to your podcast or whatever. If you're selling them if you are selling them something, you can be doing it on $1,000 microphone in the best studio in the world. If they feel that they're listening to a hustle, they will not listen. Podcasting is very much a part of what we term as content marketing, which is the idea that you're going to put good content out there and people are going to find it. And that good content is going to build a bridge of trust between you and the audience. One of the ways I always analogize this is that it used to be that, 20 years ago, if you needed to know how to put paint on your deck or seal the deck so that it would be weatherproof, you would go to the local hardware store and ask. But people don't do that now. If you're sitting around the living room and somebody says, "Hey, what kind of shellac do we need to put on the wood outside?" the first thing you do is pull out your phone and Google it. So if you're that local hardware store, you want to make sure that information is there because they're going to find it. They're going to analyze it. And if it sounds like an advertisement, they're going to go to the next video. They want to know exactly how to seal their deck. And if they feel that you're giving them good information, then they will make the next step to go to you and either hire a service or buy the products from you or whatever. So in the context of content marketing, being honest with your audience is not only ethically the right thing to do, but it is also a great marketing strategy. And that bottom line of being honest with your content and being sincere about who you are I feel, a very important aspect to podcasting and making sure that your content is far greater than whatever means you're using. You can do podcasting with your phone and still, unless you're in the business like I am of actually producing stuff, but if you're producing content, you can make an excellent podcast with just your phone. People will find great content. Stefan, I'm kind of interested with, the podcasters that you sort of run with. How are they approaching their work? How do you approach it? And do you kind of agree with me about just being sincere, not being grand, but just being sincere is a great way to approach your audience?
Loaded question. So first off, I tell the truth on my podcast. If I'm struggling with something, I tell people exactly what I'm struggling with. I know I don't follow a lot of podcasts, but I do follow some where I'm like, yeah, it seems like you're kind of struggling, but you're like putting on this front.
Right.
And that's something that I told myself when I started, I was not going to do. So like, if I'm struggling with, I told them how, when I lived with my mom, how we lived in the projects and we didn't have money. So I was wearing like hand-me-downs, or I went to Goodwill and I would buy clothes from there. So I would tell people stories from my past of me struggling. Even now, if I go through something, I always let them know, because I never know who's listening and who's struggling as well. And maybe they might hear my show and be like, you know what, he's struggling as well. And, and maybe that might give them some confidence. I've never been a huge fan of people who don't tell the truth about their podcast, or maybe they're living, or maybe on the podcast, they live some fancy life, but then in reality, they don't.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you can start a podcast. I mean, my podcast that I started was off of some equipment that I got off Amazon for like $20. So it truly doesn't matter what you have. Like you said, you can start with your phone, you can start with your iPad. It just depends on the type of content that you're giving people. Like, is it true? Is it natural? Because that's what people are going to keep coming back to. They're not going to come back if they feel like your podcast is trying to sell them something, or you're trying to do something that they're like, I don't really know about. But they are going to come back if they're like, oh, he's a genuine person. He tells real stories from his life, not from 15 other people's lives.
Yeah.
But they come back for a real story, for a real person.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I know that Mistress is going to agree with me on that. My question to you would be, in terms of your content, how do you manage it I've always, I've been doing this a long time, and not every one of my shows has hit it out of the park. I mean, it's impossible to do this thing year after year and have every show just, hit it out of the park. But I do try to maintain a certain level of consistency. I do try to maintain a certain amount of professionalism present in every show. I try to always respect the people that I'm talking to, whether I agree with them or not, etc. So there's always that level of consistency. Are there certain measuring sticks that you use, Mistress, to make sure that your show is going to be consistent? And that can be difficult because when I was a disc jockey, there was times when, they always expected you to sound happy and enthusiastic about the music, but there was just days your body chemistry was telling you it's not there. And that can be very difficult to do. So how do you hit those marks, Mistress?
I agree with what Stefan said. It's about being a person of truth and integrity. So it's not even about trying to sell anything. Like, I'm not trying to sell an image or a story. I'm trying to help people. Mm-hmm. And so I will be very open about my details about growing up in a cult and being abused. And so I'm not there to perform and to make that sound like something that's happy when it wasn't.
Right.
So I just tend to, I do what I call standing in my truth. And that's what I encourage others to do, because when you stand in your truth, you can take a breath and go, wait a minute, I'm hurt, I'm lonely, I'm afraid. Wait, I'm excited, I feel empowered. And when you stand in your truth, you can know what to do in that moment. When we are too busy trying to put on a show and trying to sell people a mood, we're not being as convincing as we think we are. Like Stefan said, you can read through that. So I don't have the life energy to perform. I come as I am. And sometimes I'm having like a really heavy show. Sometimes I'm a bit angrier and I'm like, listen, guys, just get your shit together. Like, whatever it is that I feel, that's what's coming out in that moment, period. And they either love me or hate me. And that's the way it goes.
Both of you, I'm so grateful for my first time out that I've had, two very great guests. So thank you very much. Some great points here. But thank you so much, Stefan and Mistress. And I followed you both.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you, Billy D. Nice to meet you. And you too, Stefan.
Nice meeting you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Well, I got to tell you what, this fireside thing to me seems very intriguing. Maybe next time I will do video as well. We're coming up on the holidays here. That's always can kind of be a dark black hole, that time between Christmas and New Year's. That's kind of like a content black hole. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do next week. I got a lot of interviews scheduled on the regular podcast coming up for January. But I believe I want to turn my attention a little bit more to Fireside, to do shows on here, and also to do some podcasts that are generated here, because I feel this has a podcast vibe. This very much has a show vibe, which is very important because I don't get that from someone like the Clubhouse and the Twitter Spaces. They're just like chatter rooms. This here is structured very much like a radio program, and I believe that this is something. It's enough of a production tool that I'm very excited about using. I want to thank everyone in the studio who came in to listen. This was my first time out here on Fireside. Thank you very much. My name is Billy Dees, and if you want to, you can follow me on Twitter and make sure I follow you back. If I don't, send me a tweet or something, and I'll get in there and we'll have some fun on Twitter. And let me tell you something, things are getting crazy over there. So have a good evening, and if I don't get a chance to you between now and Christmas, have a fantastic holiday season. I'm Billy Dees and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter @Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.